do a quick sound check.
1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Sounds good. Whenever you're ready.
Are we good, yeah?
Yeah, good to go.
Right. All right, we're going to do a video about the election. To be honest, I didn't really want to do a video about the election because the election is very often so much bullshit. We get everybody very, very excited and then nothing changes and people get quite depressed. As you know, this channel is an economics channel and we have a very clear message and a very clear idea on this channel, which is that inequality, specifically inequality of wealth, is growing and growing. That is causing falls in living standards for ordinary families, which you can see, and it's going to get worse and worse, and we need to change that. People often ask me, why don't you get into politics? And when people say that to me, I always say the same thing, which is I'm in politics. I'm in politics. I often ask them, you know Rupert Murdoch, is he in politics? So Rupert Murdoch, for people who you don't know, he's a very, very, very wealthy Australian who owns a lot of newspapers and a lot of TV channels here in the UK, also in Australia, I think in the US as well, all across the world. And he basically tries to convince people to hate foreigners and not tax rich people, and it's something he's been very successful at. And he controls a lot of politicians, and politicians do what he says because he controls what people think and who people vote for. So the first thing to say is we're going to get a new Prime Minister early next month. Rishi Sunak, the current Prime Minister, has called an election. He will lose that election and Keir Starmer, the head of the Labour Party, will become Prime Minister on July 4th. A lot of people will be very excited about that. That's understandable. The Conservatives have been in power for 14 years now. I was a very young man when they took power. They've overseen an enormous increase in inequality. They've overseen an enormous increase in poverty. They've overseen an enormous fall in living standards. In many cases, most of the senior politicians, Conservative politicians, are very, very wealthy people from very, very wealthy backgrounds. In particular, Rishi Sunak is an extremely wealthy man from an extremely wealthy family. I've been criticising him ever since he became Chancellor because he has consistently brought in policies which have enriched the richest, that have increased inequality, and in my opinion have been the source of falling living standards in this country. So you might think I would be absolutely delighted at the fact that the Conservatives are going to be voted out. There's a good chance they will not only be voted out, but that they will lose very badly, that they will lose a lot of seats, that a lot of famous MPs will lose their seats, and a lot of people on the left are understandably very excited about that. And I would like to be excited about it as well. Don't get me wrong, I will probably enjoy watching Rishi Sunak lose, and it would be nice if some big Conservative MPs who have consistently opposed tax on the rich lose their seats. But it's very hard for me to be excited because I don't think we will see any improvements in living standards. And I think that there's a tendency, an understandable tendency, to see politics as a bit like football. I support this political team, you support that political team, I want your political team to lose, I want my political team to win. But my background is not politics, my background is economics, and my background is a trader. And what I am worried about is the continual collapse in living standards. I don't think we will change that unless we do something about inequality. We need to stop it from rising. It is rising very quickly. If we don't take action on that, living standards will continue to fall. And my honest opinion, unfortunately, is that the new government, the new Labour government, will not take action on that. They will not stop inequality from rising. They will not stop living standards from falling. So it's really difficult for me to be excited about the election. So the first message I want to put across is, don't get too excited. There's going to be I say that, I think a lot of people won't be that excited anyway, because I think people won't have high expectations. There'll be a lot of political coverage on the news. The Conservatives will lose, they'll probably lose by quite a lot. We'll get a Labour government. Don't raise your hopes too much, because I worry when we see things like this, everybody gets very excited, everybody hopes for more, everybody expects change. And then when change doesn't come, people become disappointed, people become despondent, people become depressed, and people start to completely lose faith in the status quo and what's happening. This election, in my opinion, is not the big fight. So let's talk about why. But before I do that, I want to say as well, please avoid the excessive footballification of politics. I view politics through the lens of the economy. My view on the economy at the moment is that it is collapsing. From the perspective of living standards of ordinary people, that's not going to stop. The only way to stop that, in my opinion, is for ordinary people to unite and agree that we need to take action, stopping the increasing, exploding wealth of the very rich and the transfer of wealth from ordinary people to the very rich. When we divide ordinary working people into red and blue and yellow, it often makes it harder to achieve that unity. So don't allow this election to create more division between ordinary people. That being said, we need to do some analysis of the election itself. So let's get started. So the first thing is the calling of the election itself. And this is quite funny in a way. We put a video out a few weeks ago predicting that inflation would fall in this country for really obvious reasons. You know, it's a good video. Go back and watch it. I think it's called Predicting Inflation or Why Inflation Will Fall This Week. We'll put a link in the description. And in that video, we said that almost certainly the official inflation statistic for the country would fall significantly this month. It was extremely predictable. It was for historical reasons, but we knew that the government would try to take credit for it. And I honestly think that is the reason they've called this election. If you go back and look at that video, we explain that inflation was bound to fall this month. It will probably fall again slightly next month, and then it will start to rise after that. So if we have an election on July the 4th, which we will have just seen a couple of inflation statistic prints, which look really good for the government, and we won't yet have had the inflation starting to rise again. The Conservatives and Rishi Sunak are currently very unpopular, but here is this one statistic which they have tried to claim aggressive credit for. Inflation is coming down. It will probably come down again in the print this month. They want to claim credit for that, and I think they've decided that this is kind of the only good news story that they've got. So let's run with it. Let's call an election while inflation is low, and let's hope people vote for us. But not a lot of people are going to vote for them, which is largely because living standards have really significantly collapsed under their government. So, you know, I follow the betting odds quite closely. It's almost certain the Conservatives will lose and Labour will win. Labour will win an overall majority. It could be a pretty significant overall majority. And different people have different opinions on why that is, but I think that is almost exclusively because living standards have fallen so much. And it's been 14 years of Conservative government. People can see that life is getting harder. People want change. I don't think there's a lot of particular enthusiasm for the Labour Party. But here in the United Kingdom, we have a first-past-the-post political system, which I can discuss a little bit more perhaps in another video. It basically means that similarly to the US, we have a two-party system where it's almost impossible for any party other than the two major parties to take power. So if you don't like the Conservatives, if you're not happy with the falling living standards, you basically have no choice other than Labour. The Conservatives and Rishi Sunak are extremely unpopular, so we're going to get probably a significantly large Labour majority in this government. What does that mean? You know, I've got here on my list to go through the policies of the parties, but you know, you're going to get the policies of the parties and the manifestos of the parties rammed down your neck on BBC News and Sky News as if they're important, as if they matter. To be honest, they don't really matter. they're going to make a lot of promises. They're going to promise to cut your taxes. They're going to promise to do loads of amazing things, which they basically can't pay for because I don't think you can fund these things if you're not willing to raise taxes on the rich. So it's a lot of pie in the sky policy. Really, you've got two parties that are promising to continue pretty much the economic status quo. You probably get a little bit more austerity under the Conservatives, which will probably be worse. But I think Labour have not really offered us anything significant. Behind the scenes, I talk to Labour politicians and I try to lobby Labour politicians to do more on inequality, but basically we have not done enough and we're not going to get enough. When I ask Labour politicians why you're not taking action on inequality, why you're not taxing very rich people, some of them say we would like to do it, but we don't think it's a vote winner. For me, that's quite depressing because this is what I try to do on this channel. The whole point of this channel is for me to convince you that the only way to stop your falling living standards is to stop the increase in inequality. The only way to stop the increase in inequality is to significantly increase taxes on the rich so that we can cut tax on ordinary people. And unfortunately, both the major political parties at this point in time don't think that's a vote winner. So that's a failure for me and that's a failure for us. But the truth of the matter is, I never thought that we would win anything in this election. I was expecting the election to be at the end of the year, October, November. I've been trying to really aggressively grow this channel, but it was never really to target this year's election because I never thought we would get much from this year's election. But there is one small shrapnel of hope, something that we can be proud of, that I can be proud of, that you can be proud of, which is that the Green Party has adopted our call. The Green Party has adopted basically exactly what I've been campaigning for, which is a 1% tax on wealth of above 10 million. That's something that I'm proud of. It's something that you can be proud of. Anyone who watches this channel, who supports this channel, who helps to grow this channel. It is, of course, not just because of me. There's a lot of groups that I work with that have been campaigning for this as well. There's the Patriotic Millionaires who have done amazing work. Rebecca Gowland, who runs that organisation, has done an amazing work, and all of the millionaires who are part of that group have done amazing work campaigning for it. Tax Justice UK have been campaigning for the same thing. Economists like Aaron Advani at Warwick have been campaigning for the same thing. And we've got it into the Green Manifesto, into the Green Policy, which is something we should be proud of. And, I'm really grateful for everyone who's pushed for it, and I'm grateful for the Greens putting in their manifesto. The reality is the Greens are, of course, not going to get into power in this election. The nature of our political system, basically, it's a two-party job, and it's very, very difficult to shift that. But if the Greens do well, if the Greens get more votes, in the best case scenario, they could win a couple of more seats. It is a message that people are willing to accept these kinds of policies. So I'll be voting for the Greens, and I'm not going to tell you guys who to vote for, but these guys have adopted what we've been campaigning for. The reality is they're not going to win, but if they get a big vote, if they get a couple more seats, which in the best case they could, it is a good sign. It is a good sign. So that's who I'll be voting for. So what could happen? Because, the truth is, I don't think this is going to be, even though we might see like a big political landslide, a big collapse of the Conservatives and a massive majority for Labour, I don't think it really changes our game much because Labour are not really going to give us the policies that we want. The truth is we might get a few more opportunities. I put a video out when Rishi Sunak became Conservative leader. It's easy to forget this now, but when Rishi Sunak became Conservative leader, he had a really good brand. He was considered to be really smart, really competent, really good with money, and a lot of people were really happy to see him be Prime Minister. And I put a video out saying Rishi Sunak will be phenomenally unpopular in a year's time, just basically, specifically for the exact same reasons that I'm telling you now that Keir Starmer will be very unpopular in a year and a half's time, because Rishi Sunak did not take action on inequality, which meant living standards continued to fall. Keir Starmer looks like he's not going to take action on inequality, which means living standards will continue to fall. So Rishi Sunak's popularity collapsed, but that really never gave us any opportunities because I've never once been contacted by a Conservative MP on the work that I do. If Labour win a year, 2 years, 3 years into a Labour government, if living standards have not recovered, which which they won't, Keir Starmer will be very unpopular. There might be demand for change and for new policies. If we can keep growing what we're doing, we can try and get ourselves to be the big voice in the room when that happens. There's a quote by the famous, very right-wing American economist Milton Friedman, which is, at times of crisis, the new solution will be chosen from the ideas lying around at the time. What you can see from the way the two main parties have gone into this election is that this idea that the problem is inequality is not the loudest idea lying around at the time. To be honest, if you look at the policies of the two main parties, it seems like there is no idea lying around, because they don't seem to be offering anything new on the economy. The biggest new idea, which is starting to get popular about the economy, you can see the Conservatives edging that way. You can see it becoming popular across Europe and also in the US, is that the problem is immigrants, is that the problem is foreigners. This is a really popular economic idea, especially at times of crisis. It was really popular in the early 20th century. It was a big part of the reason of why we ended up getting the Second World War, why we ended up getting the Holocaust, things like this. We need to make our idea big enough such that when the next election comes around, the two main parties can't ignore it. That's what I think, basically. And I think this election, as much it's fantastic that the Greens have taken up our ideas, the Greens are not going to get into power, we need to win that argument for ideas. We need to win that argument for ideas for the next election. I think that's all we can do. That's all we can do. I think I love football and I love politics for a similar reason. I love football because I just am a kind of a geeky guy that likes these kinds of things. And a couple of years ago, I had a 2-year plan for this channel, which was to grow it massively, and the book was part of that. And it's been massively successful. The growth in this channel has been enormous. The growth in these ideas have been enormous. The fact that we're getting these ideas more understood, more recognised by politicians, by ordinary people is partly thanks to the work that I've done and the work that you've done sharing this. I was kind of working towards the end of the year as my time horizon, and even though I knew we weren't going to win anything from the election, you're kind of thinking maybe we can get ourselves a voice, The election got called earlier and we're not in a position to influence the main political parties. And I think it's hard when you work so hard at something and you see how far you've come on it, and you look up and you see how much further you have to go on that thing. So basically, Livingstoneers are not going to rise after this election. We'll get a new government. They're not going to do anything on inequality. But I never thought we would get anything from the Conservatives, and I never thought we would get anything from Labour. And before I started this YouTube channel, I existed in the world of like think tanks and newspapers, and I spoke to politicians and I spoke to people who speak to politicians, and I still speak to people who speak to politicians now. And I made the intentional choice to stop speaking to politicians and start speaking to you, because I don't think that the politicians are going to save us. I think that we have to save us. And I think if enough of you realise that what we need is action on inequality, what we need is a fairer tax system that taxes the rich more and taxes working people less. I honestly believe we can get ourselves into a situation where when we go into an election, the political parties have to do something. And this might sound an absurd comparison, but in a weird way, I sometimes take hope from Brexit. Because in 2015, none of the major political parties supported Brexit. They were all quite passionately against it. And people consistently voted for parties that were pro-Brexit, to the point where now the main political parties, they don't want to support Brexit, but they have to support Brexit. And You know, I don't necessarily think Brexit is going to save us, and I don't think Brexit necessarily is going to get us out of this problem. But what it shows is if enough ordinary people demand something, we do still live in a democracy, and the politicians will eventually have to give us that. But we're not loud enough. My voice is not loud enough. Your voice is not loud enough. But it was always going to be a marathon, not a sprint. I'll be voting for the one party that has supported my ideas. I think the first past the post political system is stupid. I'll be swapping my vote, if it helps, on vote swapping websites. Listen, there'll be people that will say, don't vote for the Greens because you need to vote for whoever will get the Tories out. And that's a legitimate opinion. And if that's what you want to do, you can do that. I'll swap my vote so that I can try and do both. I would encourage you to do what you think is best, but also to realise, don't get caught up in the hype of this election. The real battle for living standards is a battle for distribution. It's a battle for inequality. It's a battle which, unfortunately, at the moment, none of the politicians are fighting for us. I'm going to keep fighting. Well, I'm going to take a holiday, actually, because I need one. But when I come back, I'll be fighting. And I hope you guys will fight with me. So don't worry too much about Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. It's a marathon, not a sprint. I'll keep going, and I hope you guys come with me. So thanks for your support, and we'll keep going. Thank you. Happy with that?
Yeah, great, man. That's great. Emotional.
Yeah, this is frustrating, isn't it? You know, it just...
Yeah.
It's hard when you realise, like, fucking how much you have to work and how much harder, how much more you have to come still, you know? You know what I'll do, and you know, you can stick this in on the end if you want. Like, I'm in a safe Labour seat. I will try and swap a Green vote into a seat that the Greens are challenging for. Probably they won't want to swap with me because people all over the country will be trying to swap into about 4 Green seats, right? So what I'll probably do is I'll vote Green here and I'll swap a Labour vote into a marginal. Or I might even swap a Lib Dem vote into a marginal to try and, like, you know... I don't want to see... Listen, there's people that will say, how can you support the Greens? You've got to fight the Tories. And that's... I don't disrespect that view. And there are people who will say, how can you support Labour when they do this, they do that? And obviously I haven't mentioned things they do outside of economics, but I think you can get the sense I'm disappointed in Labour. And I appreciate that point of view as well. But I'll swap so I can try and fight both fights. And also, like, I'm not going to just, like, insult people because, you know, I think both of those views are legitimate views. I think if the Tories lose, which they do, and we get a big Labour majority, we have a better chance than if the Tories don't lose. You know, I think if we get a big Green vote, realistically, the press will ignore that big Green vote. But if we get a big Green vote, it at least is a signal, you know. And one thing I will say, I would encourage people to vote. I would encourage people to vote. And if you can, you know, if it works for you, vote. Because, you know, a lot of poor people, a lot of young people don't vote and we get ignored. And I know a lot of people are discouraged with Labour and I'm discouraged with Labour. But if you know, and maybe some people don't like the Greens for some reason, I would encourage you to go and vote. And, you know, if that means voting for an independent, if that means voting for Labour, if that means voting for Greens, if that means voting for the Lib Dems or the SNP to get the Tories out of your seat, these are all legit views. Like, I don't want to see ordinary people divided by, like, oh, my party's better than your party. Like, the situation is too serious for that. The situation is too serious for that. But more than anything, this election is not the be all and end all, you know. Go out, cast your vote, dust your hands off, move on, because we've got we have many years of fighting ahead of us, and we can't afford to just, like, exhaust ourselves all on this one thing.
For sure. Should we just cut there? That was pretty
Yeah,
good,
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Stick that.
Break.